That's what happens with everything. Like I don't have like a preset like I'm gonna try this combo out or some shit. It's just merely like, yo, the riffs are just compelling me to do and like act out. I'll never say I'm a goon. I just act out and I'm having a grand old time. So some people may be like, oh my god, that kid's an idiot. I'm just like, I don't care. I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. I think I'm ready to go if you are.
Um, I think I'm about ready to
You got
what
your
do I
bev
need? Do I
on
need
hand?
Oh, dude, I got my beverage on hand. I got it. So, got a specialty for tonight. If you see me drink this is not milk. It's just water in a milk jug.
Perfect.
So, but I think we're good to go.
Rad. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. Joining me today is a S tier mosh warrior, someone who I'm pretty sure has actually gone toe to toe with a silverback gorilla at one point in his life. We welcome Corey from Boston on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming through.
No problem, man. That was a ridiculous intro. But S tier mosh there, I'll take that. S tier, I like that.
Yeah, I've already done the this next guest is best described by his Instagram handle, so I had to like shake it up a little bit.
I'm glad that the Instagram handle seems fitting for who I am.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Well, Corey, before we, start to get in the flow of things, can you just say hello to the folks at home, introduce yourself and the bands you're a part of and how you're known in hardcore?
yeah, hi everyone. My name's Corey from Boston. I was never a part of any bands until literally this year. I'm in a band called Move slash Boston Hardcore. We just started, put out a demo at the start of the pandemic, actually, in March. So you can go listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, everything you can stream music on. So, but most notably, probably is my presence at the front of the stage in some videos on the 856 website. So that is what people probably like most noticed me from. Just kind of being a kid that has traveled, not a kid, being an adult, a grown ass man that has traveled quite a bit to go to shows and see some of my homies' bands and hang out. So that's pretty much how people may notice me.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about how you time travel and find out about these mosh moves from the future and bring them to our present day. But also, would love to be chatting about Move and what the move is with you guys as of recently. Before we get super into it, got to do the bev check to kind of
Dog,
get us in line. So yeah,
I got a
you go
special
first.
one
What do you
today.
got? What do you
Yeah,
got?
dude, I got a Red Bull Shirley Temple with the blue Red Bull.
Oh, okay.
So a little grenadine, a little Red Bull together, and you got the one of the best drinks of all time.
Yeah, I would have never thought to cocktail a Red Bull before. Brings me back to Nathan from Stepping Stone. He always has his Red Bull Sugar Freeze on ice. So
Really?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He's a weirdo though. He's like
Classy.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 is the best pro skater. I was like, whoa, like you are in a interest area of your own. I got a Guru Organic Energy Drink. This is like my favorite Canadian energy drink, and it's got like almost zero sugar, so it's just a nice caffeine boost.
I'm I'm on the opposite spectrum as you. I got all the sugar up in this bad boy right now.
We're yin and yang as far as this podcast goes.
Yes.
Well, Corey, I'm really excited to be chatting about you. This is the first time that we've gone to do a one-on-one, but I feel like I know you through some of the clips and things that I've seen online, which we'll get to. But I fully believe it's important to get context about how all my guests got into hardcore. So let's go back in time. Give me the Corey hardcore origin story and how you started going to shows.
Yeah, I actually grew up skateboarding, still skateboard today. And so getting into more of like alternative music and getting more into guitar music and all that type of stuff all happened kind of through the skate park.
Yeah.
There's one skate park that I used to go to when I was a little legit, like 10 years old, called Skaters Paradise in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. And they always had the jukebox bumping there, whether it was like a lot of Ramones, a lot of Metallica, lots of Slayer, lots of Wu Tang. They always had like something playing there. And I think that's kind of where I got my first sort of like, oh, I don't know why, but I like the sound of like Slayer and the Ramones and sort of like Metallica.
Yeah.
So from there, I kind of fell into like getting into new metal, and like still to my favorite day band to this day, which is like right back there, is Slipknot by far. And they were like, I don't know why, but I just somehow found them. It was sort of like scared of the masks at first because I remember watching the Spit It Out music video and being like, this is creepy.
Yeah.
And then also like the riffs and everything just kind of sucked me in. And that's sort of how I first got into like listening to more guitar based like alternative music, and just felt like this was where I needed to be. And then, I'm 26, so kind of grew up in the age of the internet, and just remember like me and my friends listening to Yahoo Music and watching music videos like for hours, and would
Yeah.
just be like, oh my God, like getting to Linkin Park, getting into like, more Slipknot, System of the Down, Corn, all these various new metal bands. And then that kind of transcended more so into getting into like more screamo based music and finding more harder music, which was kind of through the help of my sister, who was like a scene girl at the time. And
Okay.
so she kind of bestowed upon me a lot of metalcore and like Dr. Acula, See You Next Tuesday, like Drop Dead Gorgeous, Vanna, a lot of those
Oh
bands.
man.
And so I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Vanna
So
is a band that was in the early, like, call it the Spencer emo days, but man, that band, some of those early albums still hold up in my opinion.
dude, honestly, the search party never came is like by far. I got to go to their last show before they kind of reformed that. Well, their OG members
Yeah.
started a new band called In Spirit, but I got to go to their last show, and it was like they played all those joints, and that shit was so good. But
Nice.
essentially, that was sort of how I got more into that like underground, not as much on the radio type shit, and then it kind of culminated to 2009, where I went to my first Warp Tour, which was my first ever live music experience. And with Warp Tour having no headliners, I actually was brought there by one of my good friends at the time in middle school. His parents vouched to my parents, like, hey, we'll make sure that he's safe. We'll drop him off, you pick him up. And the first band I got to see was Under Oath, which was insane.
Oh.
And then pretty much just got immediately mollywopped while I was moshing. Was like, that sucked. And then one of my sister's friends was there who was like, he like went and like moshed the kid, which is mad corny. But at the same time, I was like, this is so sick. I want to do this forever. And that was like the first show. It just kept on moshing and moving from that point on since 2009. And, went to a lot of bigger shows at this place called the Palladium in Worcester. And then kind of went from there to where I really found my bearing in like in hardcore, which is at Anchors Up. And my first show there was like in 2011, which was a power trip. What was it? It was Power Trip, Black Sheep, this band Dirty Work, Rude Awakening, and I think one other band. And that was like my first ever show at Anchors Up, which is Anchors Up was the greatest hardcore venue of all time,
Mhm.
hands down. The hardest moshing, the best energy. It didn't matter if it was a local band, didn't matter if it was a touring band. People would show up. It didn't matter if there's 5 people or 200 people. People were going to pit like it was a pit or die situation every time.
Yeah.
And that was where I really started like going to shows and really started to like understand what hardcore was and sort of like what the scene meant and that mentality. And so that's sort of how we got to, almost being where I'm at today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting just hearing people talk about underground music, but it's literally like one shovel of like, oh, you see the layer of like Warp Tour, and then you dig a little deeper, and then it's like, oh, here are these shows, and then it's like you can go further and further and just get into like there's this like I don't know if this is too corny, but like this underground community, and everyone's been living there, and be like, "Oh, you found us? Like, welcome! Like, come on in."
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I feel like it's weird to describe that to people because when you talk about underground music, people be like, "Oh yeah, I know about underground music," about like either underground like hip hop or
sure,
house or whatever it may be. That's still on such a larger scale than hardcore, where you gotta dial back and be like, you know, the Beyonce of hardcore, like Terror, Turnstile, like their biggest shows that you'll see them play in the States are only, under 10,000 people.
sure,
Like
yeah,
2,000 people is like insane. The largest hardcore show in history just happened last year. That was what, like 7,500 people. So it's funny when you talk to people and you need to really like get them to understand that gauge and what we really mean by the underground and like
right,
by DIY type shit.
yeah.
So yeah.
To go back to the first point that you were talking about, as far as like being at the skate park and having a skate park and just having the jukebox going, was it just like blaring so loud that you're trying to like nail your first kickflip, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the song that comes on? You tried to like motivate you to a degree.
It was that and also the people there. So it was like a
Oh,
cool
okay.
little community. It was an indoor skate park. So there's the
Oh,
dudes that
okay.
worked the skate park and built the skate park, and I was sort of, the little grom that they would hang out with and like gave me a nickname, and I was like a part of their little squad that they'd take me around. And they were like, I remember people being like, this is that shit, or like, dude, you have to listen to this or check out this or
Mhm.
blah blah blah. One dude in particular is kid Dan, who like is one of the most influential people in my life, and luckily we're still connected to this day, which is super funny. But like he was always putting me on into like metal music, and like he was a sick guitarist too, so he would be like jamming at the skate park. It was a very lawless skate park. Like
Yeah.
people were living underneath the bowl.
Oh,
Like
what?
it was yeah, it was the sickest place ever. And like I look back upon how much time I spent in my adolescence there, and I'm like, I don't like it was the best and the worst place for me to be all at the same time.
Right.
But I'm kind of happy with how I turned out. And yeah, it was crazy. Like I remember it distinctly hearing like Johnny Cash, Ring of Fire, whenever I was skating one of the mini ramps there. They had the sickest mini ramp of all time called the Nar ramp. And like I just remember them playing it all the time, or like hearing the Ramones and just be like, oh, it's time to skate wicked fast. And like, or like hearing Slayer playing while you're skating the bowl and be like, well, I need to almost kill myself every single time I drop into this. Like it's only
He's
right.
saying raining
And it's
blood, so it's time
dude,
to bleed.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it still happens to this day. Like, Power Trip will come on, RIP Riley, and like fucking I'm just like, oh, I need to skate 1,000 miles per hour right now because it only fits this music. Like I need to do that.
Yeah, I don't know, there's something subconsciously about, like, fast, like, punk beats and just, like, those really fast riffs where I'm driving and then I realize I'm 20 over, and I'm just like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
gotta slow my ass down here." So, yeah, I feel like a lot of that foundational stuff is really, really interesting, and, we're gonna fast forward a little bit here. So like you're saying before, a lot of people might know you from, seeing you going off at in a This Is Hardcore production that Sunny has put together. Um, has movement and moshing and dancing always kind of be within your like realm of this is what I want to do in my community? Because yeah, a mutual friend of both of ours is like Evan McIsaac, and he's kind of like a mosh warrior out here in Western Canada.
Dude, I
Um,
love Ev.
yeah, he's just a very smart gentleman, and just a absolute like fiend in the
Lunatic.
mosh pit. Um,
I just call him the manliest man in the world all the time, just because he's like, yeah, dude, I'm in the middle of like the fucking Arctic on an oil rig or some shit, doing the most gnarly shit. He's like, oh yeah, I just did firefighter training, become a firefighter. I'm like, dude, you just do the most raw occupations that you could potentially do.
yeah.
And like, I remember we used to play Battlefield a few years ago together all the time. It was the funniest shit. Haven't seen the dude of the ever, but shout out to Evan. Shout out to Badlands because that band was so sick.
Yeah,
Never
yeah,
got to see them.
yeah. But he came on the pod. It was funny. He was the very last in-person podcast that I did before this whole thing went down.
Oh,
But in that podcast, we were just talking about like the importance of moshing, and I know like a couple people have just cringed on just hearing those words coming out of my mouth. But, talk to me about like have you always been doing that, or did someone you see someone like with a ton of style and you're like, I want to do that? Tell me about how that got planted into your life as far as being in hardcore.
So probably like I always saw people moshing and was like, this looks super fun. I want to do this. But it was actually my best friend Chanel, who's in a bunch of bands, what was or has been one now called Wisdom and War. And she was sort of like the individual who took me under their wing. It showed me like, this is how you mosh for real. This is how you mosh not for real. And it kind of put into my brain that it's like, oh, if you want to like not, the best defense is offense. So like if you don't want to get hit, you might as well just mosh hard enough to the point where people just don't want to be near you. I was like, that makes a lot of sense in my brain.
Right.
And I think with the style aspect, it was something that I always enjoyed doing just because it's that fear of being in there. It's that adrenaline of like, damn, I could get hit at any moment and like, boom, I'm out. That could be the end of the day for me. Like, I'll be peaced out. But it's just like what the music makes me do. Like, my body is from like my first show, I always wanted to move. And there's some videos of like two stepping from Guns Up that I used to watch. I was like, that looks so tight. And it wasn't until I went to Anchors Up where I like saw it with like people who had forceful but super cool looking moshing. Was like particularly this kid Dylan Carlo, who's in a band called Typecast, and this kid George K, who was in a band. No, he actually isn't in any bands, but he's just like notorious Merrimack Valley hardcore mosher. And they all just like blew me away with their like not only looking good but also still being ultra violent. I was like, oh damn, well, I'm athletic enough to combine the two as well. So like, let me do that. And then I kind of just started doing like shit that I would just naturally do, like doing flips and like spins and all this random stuff that I was just like, this just feels right to do.
Sure.
So it was like those kind of combinations that got me into the sort of like how I look the way I look moshing, I guess. It was really like Anchors Up plus Chanel plus just like being more of an athletic kid doing sports and like just being an idiot and wanting to try different shit. So
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think there's kind of this unsaid thing where it's like, okay, this is a two step, so there's like these certain moves that I guess are acceptable. Like no one's gonna start a circle pit during the two step, but even there has been some people actually who have done that. But just like on seeing the different different like ways to either like utilize an arm movement or something like that is a lot of what like I'm sure a lot of it is just instinctual, like, oh, this kind of part's kicking in, do something like this, and then everything kind of connects. I'm thinking of that vein set where you were just flipping onto the stage and just like slamming down. Like, is that just like I am so like a taken by Vane's like metalcore music to just flip around like a
pretty
like a
much
goon?
like I yeah, at that point, like I always like to tell people, it's just like, dude, the riffs are compelling. Like they just compel me to do that. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. I'm just like, I heard that part. I was like, this feels like the right thing to do right now. They're just like flipping over and over and like on and off the stage. Because the first time I did it was when they played Sound and Fury, and like they played because I mean, I've been seeing Van since they're a three-piece band playing at the floor of Anchors Up. And like every time the music just got better and better and better and just more insane. And I remember them playing Doom Tech for I think like the first time at Sound and Fury, or it was like before that. I was just like, this is the most insane riff I've ever heard in the middle of the song. Like it's such a calm and like eccentric riff, but it's just so fucking hard. And
Yeah.
there's just nothing else that like my brain thought of doing besides just making myself do flips across the stage and then just like continuing moshing after and just being too tired.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just the riffs are compelling. That's what happens with everything. Like I don't have like a preset like I'm gonna try this combo out or some shit. It's just merely like yo, the riffs are just compelling me to do and like act out. You know, I'll never say I'm a goon. I just act out and I'm having a grand old time. So some people may be like, oh my God, that kid's an idiot. I'm just like, I don't care. I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny to see how, when I was like trying to set things up, like I had mistaken that you lived in Philadelphia originally, but you've just been there so
Dude,
many
you
times.
and so many other people. Like everyone, I'm like cool with a bunch of the Philly cats from like Aaron to Anthony to Lou to fucking like Sonny
Right.
to Joe Hardcore to Bob to like
It's
all
like a
those dudes.
second
Like
home kind of thing.
it really is.
Yeah.
Like when I first started traveling out of state for shows, Philadelphia, there's like a period of my life where I felt like I was going there like almost multiple times a month to either go to a show or like go hang out with my friends down there. So a lot of people are just like, "Oh, are you from Philly? Like we see you from in a bunch of Philly shows and shit. Like, and you're also friends with all these people. You must be from here." And it's like, nah, but whatever. I don't care if you know where I know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, and it's just cool to see you essentially output the same response for bands, like despite where you are, versus like, oh, like when I'm doing my hometown thing, I want to do it here, but like I don't want to like. I was even watching videos where like you were in like Japan last year. And just all these
yeah.
Japanese kids are just so confused with this big man just knocking them down.
I think it's like it's definitely a fine line because like I don't always try to act like I'm at home everywhere I go. There's that respectability in moshing where
Sure.
you gotta find that balance where it's like, okay, you know, I'm not home. Let me mosh, but like let me see, you know, the vibe is how people are.
Yeah, what's
People
the
are like,
mosh vibe?
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, like do people know me? And they're like, oh, this is what fucking Corey does, or people like, we don't know this kid, like should I kind of tone it down a little bit and not be as like aggressive and stuff. But now it's like it's not, I definitely don't feel as if I could do it anywhere. There's certain areas like I know if I'm in Philly, like I know a lot of Philly hardcore, so I feel like I can mosh just as hard there as I am in Massachusetts. If I'm in Japan, it was a little bit different because it was like I'm on tour with my one of my favorite bands and like one of my bunch of my homies. I'm obviously gonna go off for my homies.
Right.
And it was mad funny because people in Japan fucking loved it, which was the weirdest shit ever. And so I was like, all right, this is cool. And like at festivals, it's like everyone's moshing hard at festivals. So
Sure.
like whenever people see me moshing hard at fest, there's 30 out of state kids moshing hard at fest.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I definitely, you know, I understand where it's like you don't always want to act as if everywhere is your own personal home. You always want to gauge it. There's still that those unspoken rules of moshing, and I feel like that's a big one. Where like if you're out of state, especially if you're out of state at like a local show, don't act as if you're like at home. You know, until either people know you or you know them, and like bam, then everyone could be like, oh, dude, you're pretty much a part of this scene. Cool. But
Yeah.
until you hit that moment, don't be acting out, going dummy hard everywhere you are. Probably won't go over that well.
Yeah. Yeah. Shake a few hands before you break a few noses, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. You know, or like mosh hard, but like don't mosh hard where you're like hitting people or something. Like control the range of your mosh.
Yeah, I think the mosh vibe is the term of this podcast that we could.
Mosh vibe.
Yeah. So let's transition a little bit. So like you were saying, you're not someone that has this like big resume of like I was in this band and then this band. It's like you're kind of newer to that, like I guess other leg of the hardcore realm of things. So, and I think that's really interesting because a lot of people like get to starting their like very first band in like grade 9 or whatever, and it's like
I'm
they try to
26.
they try to keep them as buried as possible because they're like super whack or whatever. I'm guilty of those myself. There's some bands that I don't want to reveal on this podcast, but how did Move come together, especially with like this whole pandemic and the whole Black Lives Matter like kind of stuff that's going on in the world? Like, were those influences, or has this been something that's a long time coming for you?
Well, Black Lives Matter, I've been doing that shit since Michael Brown. You know, that's something that I've been participating in, been focused on since Ferguson, since Mike Brown, since literally the start in like, 2014 to 2016 of Black Lives Matter. That's always been something that I participated in and have spoken very heavily about, like throughout everything. And when it comes to the band aspect, it wasn't really influenced by that. It was really our guitarist Nick, who's been in a few bands in hardcore. He's in a sick one now called Black Blood Type. He just had these demos that he's been sitting on for like that he wrote back in like 2014, 2015. And last year he just hit me up on Instagram. Since we've known each other for a while, like we've traveled to back to school jam, and I've always seen him at shows and always like enjoyed his bands and shit. And so he just hit me up. He's like, yo, I have these demos. Like, would you be down to put vocals over? And I was like, you know what, man? I've always wanted to be in a band, and the demos, I listened to them, and they made me want to move, and they made me want to mosh, which made me really go, yeah, I'm down with this. And so
Yeah.
that was last year in 2019, and it was just him and I. And then we immediately, the third person that we picked up was my homie Dev, which is he's from Boston. He's a gospel drummer. Never ever played in a punk hardcore band. Never played in a punk band ever. And I was just like, I want as many black people in this as possible, because I told Nick, I was like, if we're going to do a band, I'm going to express how I feel, which is very like radical black ideologies and just very unapologetically me. And that's very unapologetically black. And I was like, I want as many black people as I can find in the band. And so hit up Dev, and he was wicked down to do it, which is really cool because in Boston, Massachusetts, there is not, we're a small city. We're only about like 650,000 people. And so you can imagine there's not the largest population of black individuals here. So for like the people who are in their, young to mid 20s and, 30s, we're pretty interconnected, which is kind of cool. We call it Black Boston. And I just knew he was a good drummer from the area. And I just hit him up, and he was like, you know what? I would fucking love to do that. I love learning new drum techniques. I love challenging myself. And he's fucking insane at drumming. He's
Mhm.
so fucking good.
Yeah.
And he's actually a drummer by trade. All the bands that he's participated in, he's always been the drummer. And I knew Dev was good because Nick was like, I can't do half this shit. And Nick's good at drumming.
Yeah,
Nick is
yeah.
a good fucking drummer, but he's like, dude, no, some of the shit is just because of the background that he had in drumming and gospel and jazz and like being more of a classically jazz drummer. So it was pretty cool to have him. And then we're just a three-piece band, and we pretty much wrote the demo and recorded the demo, which we recorded in March of this year. And it was more tweaking the songs Nick had already had, and then writing up lyrics. And a lot of the lyrics were helped by Chanel. Once again, she's an incredible lyricist, and a like crazy flows on all her tracks throughout her life. She just has that like knack for it. So
Sure.
she really helped me out with putting in some of the flows into the songs and kind of getting those ideas in the brain. And then we started put out that demo, and the demo was kind of like well received by some people, which was nice. And then we just weren't able to play any shows, which sucks because a pandemic happened. So that was kind of a dagger not to be able to play anything. And then we kind of were like, well, we might as well write some new songs and, write another release for when, we get back to life and get back to hopefully a new normal. And then our other guitarist, Andrew Crumby, he's a dude who's been into the punk hardcore scene for mad long, playing in bands like Bear Trap, I think Sex Prisoner, and like a few others. I believe maybe Sex Prisoner wasn't it? I don't know, but he's been in a bunch of cool like kind of punkish hardcore bands, and me and him skate a lot together. And he's like a fucking ripper on the guitar and skateboarding, sick skateboarder. And I was like, dude, you want to be in my band? He's like, as long as I don't need to really write any of the songs, I'm down.
Right.
And so he joined up, and then Nick found our bass player Jake, and that was sort of how Move formed. And we just finished recording an EP back in literally this month. We
Oh,
finished
okay.
recording the EP, at least finished all recordings are done. Got all the homies who had guest parts done, and now getting it mixed, and then it'll be mastered. And we're actually getting it mastered like by Arthur Risk, which was kind of cool.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, yeah, yeah. So that'll be sick. And that'll be coming out on Triple B in like early next year, which is pretty. pretty crazy to think about. So it's definitely like shit that we are. It's very, very topical to what's happening now. Every song, it's either about abolition of police, gentrification, righteous unrest, like freedom dreams, and the aspect of what the fuck like we're fighting for and what we want. And then also some around like finding your identity and sort of how sometimes people don't always accept the identity that you find over a period of time. And so those are sort of, the themes of the album, and it'll be called Freedom Dreams, which we're pretty pumped on.
Cool.
So yeah, it'll
Yeah.
be pretty cool.
Like, pun intended, but things seem to have moved fast with you guys as far as dropping the demo to making other moves very, very soon here. So that's very cool.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy. I mean, like I've known Sam, and a lot of the people in our band have known Sam for a while, so it was definitely kind of like a we know each other, and also people are like the demo's sick. And I think he was kind of like, you know what, you may have not played a show yet, but fuck it. I'm just gonna, take a little leap of faith on y'all, and I'm down to help you out with your EP and like put out your next EP for you, which we're super I didn't expect any shit like that to happen. We just put out our demo on our own, straight DIY, like everyone else does. And it was kind of cool for it to get received by somebody like Sam and actually like think highly of it, and then wanted to put out the next piece for us. So we're really psyched. And Triple B is like as much of a Boston label as it is a New York, LA, whatever label. But I
Right.
feel like, America's Hardcore Fest happens in Boston. I feel like most of the shit and most of the bands he's put out all of my favorite Boston bands practically. So it feels really cool to be on like a label that is as reputable as Triple B Records. So
Yeah, and especially something hometown as well. Like you were saying, like the city itself maybe isn't huge population wise, but Boston is kind of like this legendary hub for like, bands like Half Hard and all those kind of conglomerates coming from there.
dude,
So that's very cool.
insane bands have came from here.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be cool to have our little chapter, hopefully.
Yeah. So, as far as maybe this is a level one question, but I think, with a lot of the stuff that's happening as of recently, a lot more people are discussing and sharing bands that have black representation. And, that's becoming a lot more, I guess, at the forefront. Maybe this is just a level one question, but do you think that there is enough representation for the black community in hardcore? And what do you think are the moves, or what's the most impactful way that we can push forward to having more of that?
I mean, hardcore is such an interesting thing. I personally don't believe that like the representation is there. There is still so much whiteness in hardcore, which is absolutely fine. It's because of like inherently how the music was formed and sort of the people that are attracted to it initially, even though, one of the most influential bands of all time is Bad Brains, an all black band, but it is still like a very predominantly white space. And I think it's because like, you have a tremendous amount of like white suburban kids that fall into it, that kind of find it. And like there is that sort of within the black community sometimes when it comes to guitar music and punk and everything, it's like, oh, those are, that's a white space, it's a white dominated thing, like that shit white people do. But it's like in reality, black bands have always been here. Black bands will always be a part of it. And like I said before, black bands were one of the most influential bands in this genre of music of all time.
Hmm.
So it is definitely like we're still an underrepresented section of people. There's still shows you go to, and there are no black people at shows. Like there's shows I've been to. There's no I'm the only one there. It was that like that for a while. I think right now in like pre-pandemic hardcore 2019 going into 2020, it's some of the most diversified at least crowds that you're starting to see at hardcore, starting to see at festivals where like there's times when I'm watching, I'm like, dog, there is hella black people, there's Latinx people, there's people of different genders here, all having a good time and feeling as if they can be in this space. And I feel like that's one of the things that hardcore needs to understand to go forward and to have a better representation of all bodies of people, is that everyone should be able to have their space in this scene. There should never be this idea in which that women shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be an idea that people of non-binary or trans or various genders should not be there. There should never be this idea that like white people are sort of like the bar and the ideal and the ones who kind of like set the standard of it. It should be all inclusive because the music as a subculture was created to be as inclusive as possible, even though it is under that gauze of it's rigid. It's rigid, it's a little rugged, it's a little meaner, but it was never built upon the ideas in which this is only for certain segments of people. It was like, oh, do you not feel right in society? Do you feel as if you feel different as this? If you know, listening to the radio music, being at these concerts, be at your schools, that you don't feel right in these spaces, cool. Hardcore is that space in which you can feel right in. And I feel like a lot of people still need to understand that we need to keep the accessibility for all individuals to find that, because it is the music that we're there for. As much as hardcore turns into, like I don't know, people take it into as a form to either like make a little bit of money off of, to feel cool and get seen and imagery and all this stuff. It's like the thing that truly we're all there for is this music, and this music should be accessible to any and all bodies, no matter what.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is something that we need to very much so keep in mind, especially when things get back to normal, if we want to see a better scene, a more progressive scene, a scene that is actually more representative of all bodies that want to partake in it. Like that's the shit that we have to do, which starts with having accountability first within yourself and checking yourself and asking yourself certain questions like, cool, am I making this accessible for other people? Am I actually like sitting here and feeling as if I am broadening my social circles and being more accepted of other people and wanting to reach out and be friends with various individuals that may not look like me, that may not be the same gender as me, that may not even fucking speak the same language as me, like all these various things.
Yeah.
And then not only when you do that, after you move after inward is outward. Look at your social circles, look at your homies and kind of speak with them on what they're doing and if it is causing harm or if they're actually enabling the scene to be better in the future. Like that's the type of shit people need to do for people to start feeling more comfortable and to get more bodies in around the scene, because it is hardcore that we're here for. It's not for fucking like being cool. It's not for different social means. Like you're there for the music, and we should allow everyone to be there for the music, no matter what.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that you said there that I want to reiterate and maybe throw my little spice on it, but like you were saying, as far as like there is so much room for everyone to carve a portion of their scene, their space, what have you. And I think a lot of people, whether if you're in a band and you have this attitude of like, oh, this band's getting bigger, so that means those opportunities are coming to not coming to us, is like so backwards. And I think that's why a lot of people, when you know they hear Black Lives Matter and they think, oh, black people are trying to get above it. It's like, no, everyone's just trying to be equal. And that's what hardcore to me is like everyone needs to be on the same playing field. Everyone should have the same level. It's kind of like the floodgates. I find personally that there's people in hardcore that like open their floodgates depending on the person, depending on what influence they have, what how they can kind of sway things. And for me, that's someone who films shows, have people on podcasts, do playlists. I just like floodgates are wide open, and
Yeah,
I am totally okay to I'm gonna put this band on this playlist. I might not be the biggest fan of this band, but they put out some new music and I want to help promote them, and they reached out to
yeah.
me. So just keeping it open and just actually welcoming people versus like picking and choosing, because that's where it gets dangerous.
Yeah, and I think like regarding Black Lives Matter, it's an ideology of understanding that there is an issue that is directly towards a segment of people in this community and people of a certain race and color, and acknowledging that and wanting to support them into feeling as if they are, at the same level. Because societal wise, systemic wise, we're not. We're at such a wild disadvantage in so many means and have been for so long. So even within the scene, it's not saying that it's like, don't wear shirts that like support your local fucking black dude or black woman or some shit. But it's just like, dude, allow them to be black bodies, allow people to be unapologetically black, allow black people to have their own experiences and speak on them and how they're different without being like, oh, well, I'm in the hardcore scene too and I didn't see that. It's like, yeah, dude, you probably didn't because you're white. Like,
Right.
that's probably why you didn't see that and why you didn't feel this way and why you don't have this lens. Because no matter what you could say, you can absolutely do your own education to learn and understand what people are going through. But inherently, there's sometimes a different lens that we're looking through compared to other individuals. And even in that, blackness is not a monolith. So there's different black people in the scene that have different experiences. And that is absolutely fine as well. But it's just understanding that, allow people to be unapologetically black, allow people to talk about their experiences and not just allow them to talk about them, but acknowledge them and accept them and actually approve of them. Well, not approve of them, but don't just act as if, oh, this is a wild thing and like I don't believe this because it's different from what I inherently know.
Right.
No, that's not the way to go about, because you're just instant like being dismissive of this person's experience. So I think that is like one of the things that people really need to do in the scene. And that is for not only black people, that's for black women, black trans women, that is for women in the scene, trans women in the scene, everyone of different genders that are not a cishet male, that kind of like don't automatically, their stories are, don't mean as much because they're different and they aren't talking about the commonly shared experience that most people have. And I think that is like really important for people to do in the scene. And I think, as you mentioned, it is not a fucking, a pie chart where there isn't enough slices to go around for everyone.
Right.
There's so many fucking shows out there. And also, maybe you need to check your ego a little bit. If you're in hardcore to make money, bro, I'm gonna tell you right now, you picked the wrong fucking music to try to make money off of.
Right.
Like, no, people are not making money in hard. I mean, okay, some people make money in hardcore, but that is few and far between. Like, and if it happens, typically those bands just happen organically. They just start making money, and like that, just it's by accident almost. But like, this is not where you go to make money off of music for sure. And like, that's how I feel about Move. I'm like, dog, when shows happen up, I'll open for every fucking band in Massachusetts, no matter what. I don't give a fuck. Like, I just want to play shows and have fun. And that's all. I feel like if people more so have that mindset where they're just like, I just want to have fun in hardcore. I just want to be in the space in which it's detached a little bit from like society and you don't get to feel those same shit that you're dealing with all the time, like it would probably be a much different place, but not everyone has that mindset.
Yeah. Um, you brought up, just, doing it in two parts. The first being like looking at yourself and looking in the mirror and adjusting those things, and then the second being, check your close circle and see if your homies are doing the same. Is anyone out of line? This, that, or the other. Something that was interesting was seeing the clip that Sunny captured when you were in Japan, and just I find like a lot of those moments where we could not necessarily like change someone's mind, but confront racism like in the face, like kind of get slipped. Like you hear something at the park or like at the grocery store, and you're just like, oh, that guy's an asshole
I
or
mean, I'm
whatever.
not gonna lie though, it like it doesn't slip for me. It doesn't slip for black people. It doesn't slip. Like it, you like white people have that ability to choose whether or not it slips.
Yeah.
Like you more so can, and like yeah, black people do as well. But like it's usually at us that we're experiencing it. It is inflicted on us. So either we're choosing as a safety measure and a survival measure
Right.
not to like either look around it or not, or like some people, as a lot of people say, we're not our fucking ancestors. We're not going to be docile. We're not going to be complacent. We're going to confront this head on. And like, you can do that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah. So yeah, that was, yeah. But sorry, just,
Yeah, no,
just
no,
wanted to say
no.
that.
I appreciate you, kind of interjecting and saying that point, because that is huge. Where I could see something, and then it's like it's kind of on me to be like, okay, am I gonna step in between this and be the, you know, to be like, hey, dude, like we are the same skin tone, and what you're saying is not okay, or the person,
Yeah.
or girl, or whatever. So, um, as far as like the what I was trying to bring up, the story as far as you were in Japan, you were at a public bathroom or something, and someone had said something to Aaron of Jesus Peace and then to Sunny. So can you kind of like break down that story aside from what Sunny was filming, kind of when you kind of like jumped in the picture?
Yeah, so essentially, first off, anti-blackness is a global concept. It will follow you no matter where you are in the world. Luckily, the severity of it changes,
Hmm.
but essentially, we're off an island off of Hiroshima, and it was this like beautiful watershine and water arc. I forget the name of it, but we're walking around having a grand old time. It was awesome. And this like white dude was up in there, and so we all needed to use the bathroom real quick. So like Aaron walks in, and like I guess the dude is like says like, oh boy, and like kind of like boy, especially in the connotation of, he had a little southern twang to him, I'm not gonna lie. So we're kind of like, we know what boy he meant. He meant in the dehumanizing, demoralizing sort of boy. He said that to Aaron. And then Sonny walked in as well. And like Sunday being Indian and brown, he also said some shit to him. And then I walked in too. And like he said something under his breath, like boy, or some shit like that to me. And so like we all walked out, and we're all like, yeah, that dude definitely said some shit to us. And I mean, like, it, if it wasn't gonna be me, it was gonna be Aaron. If it was gonna be Aaron, it was gonna be Sonny. Like, so all of us were down to fucking like roll up on this dude because like none of us take that shit lightly. Like,
Sure.
especially like Aaron or I, like we don't give a fuck where we are. Um, and so we immediately like I just got to him first, and he tried to play like he was on his phone. It was like on a fucking conversation. I was like, nah, 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 dog. Like, I don't give a fuck if you think you're on the phone. I was like, you just said to my homie over here, who was like a grown ass man, you just called him boy. And he's like, oh, I said boys, like you're my. I was like, no, 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 we're not fucking stupid. I know what the fuck you said. So you're going to apologize to him right now, or like you're going to fucking apologize to him. And so he's like, oh shit, my bad, blah, blah, blah. And like apologize and all this shit. And also, like, we're in Japan. No one's trying to fucking fight a random white dude in Japan and get in trouble while we're
Right.
on tour.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, we fucking kind of dealt with it right there. And that's sort of what happened because he was saying, and definitely like the racist connotation of boy, it did not mean it lightly. And it's not super like, thinking and analyzing it, it's not super surprising because, like, in Hiroshima, there's a naval base down there. There are Americans within the military. There's Americans of all different walks of life. Lots of racist ones, not lots, but definitely fucking racist ones.
Right.
And I think that dude was kind of just like wrong place, wrong time, and thought that he was gonna get away with it, and just expect us to walk by and not say some shit when like that shit doesn't fly with me. Like I don't give a fuck. I was never like my parents, my mom, like both my parents are white. I'm adopted, sup world. Shout out to all the other adopted kids out there. But like they just never instilled the behavior to be docile in those moments. And especially I think with being in hardcore, you learn about confrontation pretty early on in hardcore, whether it's lyrically, whether it's at shows, whether it's at, hanging outside of shows or whatever, especially depending on what scenes you're in. And Massachusetts hardcore is definitely one where confrontations happen. And so I've always been, used to having that mentality of speaking to a person when they say something or do something and stuff like that. And so that was just another time where like I wasn't gonna let that dude just say some racist ass shit to us and walk by. But it was like super annoying that that shit happens in Japan. It wasn't the only time that happened in Japan. There was a fucking another time that happened too while me and Aaron were out at a bar in fucking Osaka, and a Euro dude walked up to us like he was there for holiday and was going to. I think he saw JP in Osaka when they played there, and he was talking to us. He obviously knew we're black, and like he talked about New York hardcore, and then immediately like brought up Screwdriver. It was like trying to say that Screwdriver wasn't a racist band and all this shit. And me and Aaron were just like, it was like 3 a.m. We're having a good ass time skateboarding around, just hanging the fuck out. And like we were straight up like, luckily the dude was also there with some other people, and we're just like, yo, you need to get your homie before we literally leave him on the ground in this bar and like leave.
Right.
And So luckily he like left us alone and shit, but it's like shit like that happens. And like shit like that is an anomaly. Like that happens, I'm not gonna say it happens every fucking day. For some people, it absolutely happens every fucking day. Some people it doesn't happen every day, but you know what? It's gonna happen numerous times throughout their lives, most likely, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. That fucking happens. It's just something that like unfortunately because of the skin we're in, we have to fucking deal with. And you can do it in, multiple different manners. And some of us just choose to face it head on because I'm not my fucking ancestors. I'm not gonna fucking, let people talk out of line to me for like no reason at all and just like stand for it. That's not no.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been multiple people that have talked about just like racism isn't something that people like come out of the womb and it's like, yep, your baby checks out as racist or whatnot. That's something that is taught to people over time, whether it's through just their own upbringing, like it could just be, they're just born in a certain state in the states, and it's just normal for that. But it's also, I've seen a couple clips as of recently where it's like people have been removed from certain cultures or interests, and then they just kind of I'm forgetting what the celebrity's name is, but she was talking about this one person who just she they went where the love went, and those racist communities for their
Oh, it was
race.
like Sarah something. She was
Yeah,
speaking about one of her best friends who was like a former neo-Nazi and was looking for loving community, and his love was found in a
in
neo-Nazi family
yeah,
and all that shit. Yeah, I saw that clip. And like it was all around the idea of cancel culture, which I think is just like I don't know, like a misogynistic almost term that they put on the idea of like calling people out to
right.
acknowledge and have holding people accountable. Um, but yeah, I saw that clip.
Yeah. So
So
I guess like, when you're talking about like confronting these people who do have those whether it's a daily, weekly, or, however often it happens, is obviously the goal, like is the goal more as like how do we educate people to like teach? But at the same time it's like half the time like conversations are gonna fall on deaf ears. So like what's the point in trying to have a debate with someone if no one's actually listening?
I think it's very like situational. In those times, I didn't give a fuck about that person and wanted to educate them and make them better to not go through that shit again. And that is a completely legitimate being angry, being pissed off, and not wanting to do that emotional label and work is a completely legitimate and 100% emotion that Black people feel and should be allowed. No, they're allowed to feel all the fucking time. We should not always have to be the bearers of doing this labor to educate people.
Right.
And like that's why I say it's always situational because there's times where yeah, like it could be somebody saying actually something that is just ignorant that you could tell is just like you just don't know any better and like let me learn you a little something. And sometimes that's in the aspect so I make my living environment better or I make my working situation better or I make whatever area that I'm in like a better environment for me to survive in and for me to feel more comfortable in,
Mm.
where I'll do that type of work. But if it's like a random stranger or some shit, most of the time I don't give a fuck. I'm just gonna let you understand that you're not gonna disrespect me like that, and then we're gonna get on our merry way.
Mm.
And like you can go get your education on Google fucking.com because a lot of people forget that at everyone's fingertips virtually is a computer in which you can research and understand these different ideologies and actually learn something for yourself. So I don't think that we should always be the ones that have to do this educational piece. And there's some Black people that absolutely do. There's some Black people that have dedicated their lives on doing something like this. You have your Angela Davis, your Ruth Gilmore's, your James Baldwin's of the world who literally committed their lives to be able to educate these different theories and pass them on to various different groups of people so they have a better understanding. But not every Black person needs to be that fucking educator.
Yeah.
And not every Black person should be thought to be that educator.
Yeah, yeah. That's been something that I've learned is like, the actual fatiguing nature of like respond, like especially at the very beginning, like I'm sure I can't even imagine like you getting the amount of DMs that you probably did around just like, "Hey man, this and this and this." When like I think for everyone else who's white, who's listening to this or watching this, is like it's on us as well to go to our friends that we see the writing on the wall where it's like, hey, maybe I should like, go grab a coffee or whatever and just be like, hey, like I've been noticing this, like where are you at? Versus they have some encounter and then, you know, thinking that that's just going to happen in that moment there. It's more in the intentional encounters that real change can be made probably.
Absolutely. I think that's like mad people did. People were like hitting up and shit. And a lot of the times, like depending on the person and shit, I'd be like, dude, you have Google.com. Like I'll literally send them a let me Google it for you link or some shit like that to
Right.
some people. And like that's how I'd handle those situations because it's like it's almost lazy to sometimes rely on, asking someone else unless and it depends. Like, I'm not saying I did this with everyone. There's a lot of people that I held space with and had conversations with because they may ask it a little bit differently to be more participant instead of just being like, oh, what is this all about and shit. And also, the thing is, too, it's like, this is not new. Black Lives Matter in this movement started in fucking 2014, 2015. Like, we're 6 years into this shit now. It's not like this just popped up overnight. This has been a thing that's talked about. It's been in the news. It may have not been as prominent, but it has been something that has been happening almost year over year. And so it's not something that has, a new conversation all of a sudden formed. I'll say some ideas are becoming more popularized, such as abolition, defunding the police, intersectionality, and understanding in which if we're fighting for our liberation, if we are not fighting where they centered voices of our black, you know, queer, our most marginalized individuals without in the black community, whether it's black women, black queers, black non-binaries, black trans people, like that are this liberation that we're fighting for will be, it will be short-sighted. It will be essentially just establishing a new ruling class over everyone else. So I feel like some of those concepts are becoming a lot more profound in the more like quote unquote liberal and like progressive ears, even though like in black radical circles they've been, the forefront of ideology for so long. But like even for me, like that, those were new conversations that I had recently. Those were more ideas that I understood in abolition and what it means to not only like defund the police, but divest from the prison industrial complex and putting your money elsewhere and understanding like the actual causes around this. So I think there is definitely different conversations that are happening and a lot more hard line conversations that get people to think even more greatly than just thinking about, oh, well, if we just let a black person at the table, we're good. No, bro, that is
Right.
not when we're past that.
Yeah.
Like the civil rights movement was about just finding, equality. We need equity now. We need to actually be accountable for the harm that's been committed for centuries and actually figure out ways to bring justice to that harm and ways to resolve and restore what people were and then transform our fucking carceral state to a point where we are displaying transformative justice and actually having an understanding of what we want people who commit harm to the community to end up as. Like where do we want them to go? Do we just want to commit more harm towards them and never actually get them to undo what they've done and just form them into people that will continue to repeatedly do harm over and over again? And then also thinking about like, cool, what drives somebody to commit harm to the community? So I think those are some of the different topics that are coming up in this day and age compared to it was definitely spoken about in 2014, 2015, and through the years, but now it's becoming more prominent than ever to have those ideologies. And so sometimes when people talk to me about that type of shit, I'm definitely more down to have those type of conversations. But if you're just trying to like talk to me about the bare base of like Black Lives Matter and all that shit, I'm just like, dude, Google that shit. Not only is there quite literally websites that tell you what the fuck it is, but if you Google Black Lives Matter, pretty sure there's almost like a blurb now that tells you what the fuck it is. So like, just go Google it, man. Google it,
Yeah.
and then
Do your homework.
please, for the love of
Please.
God,
Well, Corey, this has been a really inspiring and just like educational podcast, not just for me, but for probably a lot of people listening or watching. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to do that. As we start to wrap up the last section that we do for this podcast, and I'm very excited to be asking you this question, is a favorite mosh story that you would like to send us off. So
God.
that doesn't need to be something crazy that you did or crazy that happened to you. Anything that's the first thing to your mind, whatever's the most like prominent moshing moment that you want to share here is how we'll end it.
Oh, dude. That's a hard one. There's a lot of crazy mosh stories that even I like of myself, and then just like witnessing wild things. Honestly, I think like one of my favorite mosh stories ever is just watching like Jesus Piece 2017, 2018, like 2019, and just seeing how many black people are moshing. Like that is literally some of my favorite things of all time. Just seeing how many different black bodies are pitting like as hard as fucking possible to this band. That is like those are probably some of my favorite mosh stories of all time. And also definitely like instances of fear where I'm moshing, people are moshing with chains and bottles and shit, and like that shit was also wild and like it happened in a show in Massachusetts and stuff like that. But those are probably like I don't know. Those are probably seeing Colin of Arabia fucking deadlift the stage at This Is Hardcore as well during a Ramallah set. Yeah, it's on Hate 56. The dude picked up the fucking stage. I was like, that's insane. So that was one of the coolest things I ever witnessed at a show as well. But definitely those three things, like seeing a bunch of black people mosh for like the first time when I'm moshing, like I look all around me, it's just like black bodies are in the pit and fucking throwing down, to be wicked scared moshing with people who are moshing with chains and bottles and shit, and then seeing COA fucking deadlift the This Is Hardcore stage.
Damn, I
So
have to go right after this podcast and go check out
dude,
that set.
Ramallah, I swear it was like Ramallah. Just look up Ramallah This Is Hardcore sets and you'll find it.
Awesome. Well, before we go, is there anything that you want to plug, shout out? We talked about the upcoming Move record, but if there's anything that you want to send people after this podcast, the floor is yours to do so.
Yeah, everyone should go Google Aid to Abolition and understand what abolition is and different ways in which legislation can be passed to actually help defund and abolish the police. Because the idea of reforms, we've had police for 150 years. We've tried every reforms from body cameras, training, surveillance, that all perpetuates the carceral state. So we have to divest from the police and to get more funds into the community's hands and out of the hands of the police and also prisons as well. So look up Aid to Abolition. If you're wondering what are some platforms, look up Movement for Black Lives. They're a coalition of various groups, including Black Lives Matter, that put out a tremendous amount of literature and as well as platforms and understanding that is agendas that help out all Black bodies. Don't fucking look at Ice Cube. Don't fucking look at Lil Wayne. Don't fucking look at 50 Cent. Fuck all those capitalist fucking black dudes that don't give a fuck about every black body. They give a fuck about their dollars. So don't pay attention to them. Shout out to Zulu. Shout out to Bugging. Shout out to Blood Type. Shout out to Wisdom and War. Shout out to Pure Disgust because they're one of the biggest inspirations for me lyrically. Shout out to Charlie Bend in the engine room. He literally does an incredible job. He recorded our demo in a fucking basement, and he actually was able to get a new studio in Billerica, Massachusetts, where he records out of now, and it sounds incredible for the actual Freedom Dreams EP. So thank you for all the work you've done. He is an incredible individual to be able to record with. He does the great job of providing that constructive feedback while not limiting your creative freedoms and allowing you to express yourself in totality. So hit him up if you are a hardcore band in Massachusetts or anywhere in the world that wants to record, because he does a phenomenal job. So big shout out to him in the engine room. Hit him up on Instagram at Charlie Bend, and we'll probably put that shit in the episode somewhere. Shout out to Chanel and all my homies. Fucking look up Families for Justice is Healing. If you're in Massachusetts, they're an abolition grassroots organization. And figure out any grassroots organization that's in your area that you can participate in to help effect like equitable change and actually abolitionist change as in this movement. and make sure it's typically black led, and if, more importantly, if it's not just like black men running it, make sure it's a like an intersectional coalition that are running these grassroots orgs, because those are the ones that are doing the most work. um, and yeah, that's kind of like the big shit that I have to
Yeah.
shout out. So yeah.
Yeah, no personal plugs, which is always a respectable thing. Corey, this
You
has
know,
again been a blast. Someone that I've seen through the stream for the longest time, and unfortunately we're not in the same room together. But I hope that we can be in the same room one day and probably see Move capture a set. That'd be sick.
hopefully, if everyone stay the fuck home
Yeah.
so Move could play a show in 2021. That'll be my personal plug. Stay the fuck home, please.
Yeah. Hashtag stay home. Hashtag wear a mask. And hashtag move BHC.
That's it.
That's it.